internal struggles, and the beginning of decline. By the late 16th and 17th centuries, the Ottoman Empire began to experience significant internal challenges that would eventually contribute to its long, slow decline. This period was marked by growing corruption, weakening of key military institutions like the Janissaries, and significant military defeats that weakened the empire's hold on its territories. The roots of these problems lay in both internal mismanagement and external pressures from a rapidly changing world. The rise of corrupt officials. As the Ottoman Empire expanded, it became increasingly difficult to maintain effective governance over such a vast and diverse territory. By the late 16th century, the centralized system of governance that had functioned well under rulers like Suleiman the Magnificent began to falter. One key issue was the rise of corrupt officials within the imperial bureaucracy. Many high-ranking positions were often awarded based on favoritism and bribes rather than merit, leading to ineffective administration and the mismanagement of resources. The weakening of the Janissary Corps. Another major factor contributing to the empire's decline was the weakening of the Janissary Corps, the elite military force that had once been the backbone of the Ottoman army. Originally composed of Christian boys taken through the Devshirme system, the Janissaries were trained to be loyal only to the Sultan and were highly disciplined soldiers. However, by the late 16th century, the Janissary Corps began to lose its effectiveness. The Janissaries gradually became more involved in politics and gained significant power within the empire. Many Janissaries began to demand privileges, including the right to marry and pass their positions on to their sons, which diluted the discipline and fighting spirit that had made them so formidable. Over time, the Janissaries became less focused on military service and more interested in securing personal wealth and influence. As a result, the once elite fighting force became an increasingly corrupt and ineffective institution. This decline in military effectiveness had serious consequences for the empire's ability to defend its borders and maintain control over its vast territories. The weakening of the Janissaries left the empire vulnerable to both internal rebellions and external attacks from rival powers. Defeats at Lepanto, 1571, and Vienna, 1683, two major military defeats during this period further signaled the empire's weakening. The Battle of Lepanto in 1571 was a devastating naval loss for the Ottomans. A coalition of Christian powers, known as the Holy League, decisively defeated the Ottoman fleet in the Mediterranean, marking the first major defeat of the empire's navy in over a century. While the defeat at Lepanto did not immediately diminish Ottoman control of the eastern Mediterranean, it was a psychological blow to the empire and signaled the growing strength of European powers. The Siege of Vienna in 1683 marked another significant turning point. The Ottomans, under Kara Mustafa Pasha, attempted to capture Vienna for a second time, but the siege ended in failure when the Holy Roman Empire and its allies, led by the Polish King John III Sobieski, launched a counterattack that routed the Ottoman forces. The defeat at Vienna marked the end of Ottoman expansion into Europe and the beginning of a gradual retreat from its European territories. The internal struggles of the Ottoman Empire can be compared to modern states facing political corruption, economic instability, and military inefficiency. Just as the Ottomans suffered from a bloated bureaucracy and corrupt officials, many modern nations also struggle with governance issues, where leaders and officials prioritize personal gain over public service. These problems, if not addressed, can lead to political instability, economic collapse, and even the downfall of governments. Similarly, the weakening of the Janissary Corps mirrors the decay of once powerful institutions in today's world. In some countries, powerful military or political organizations lose their effectiveness over time due to internal corruption or shifting priorities, leaving the state vulnerable to external threats or internal strife. What if the Ottoman Empire had been able to implement more effective internal reforms? The Ottomans recognized many of their internal problems, but often struggled to implement meaningful reforms that could have reversed the empire's decline. For example, various sultans attempted to reform the Janissary Corps, but these efforts were often met with fierce resistance. If the empire had been more successful in curbing corruption and restoring military discipline, it's possible that the Ottoman Empire could have remained a dominant power for much longer. In this sense, the Ottoman Empire's decline offers lessons for modern states grappling with similar challenges. The inability to effectively reform corrupt systems and weak institutions can lead even the most powerful empires to fall. By the end of the 17th century, the Ottoman Empire faced significant internal challenges that contributed to its decline. The rise of corruption, the weakening of the Janissary core, and major military defeats marked the beginning of the empire's long retreat from its former glory. Despite efforts to reform, these internal struggles ultimately weakened the empire's ability to respond to external threats, setting the stage for the Ottoman Empire's slow but eventual collapse. The Tanzimat reforms and European pressure. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was increasingly viewed as the sick man of Europe. Facing both internal stagnation and external pressures from rising European powers, the Ottomans attempted a series of reforms known as the Tanzimat to modernize the empire and preserve its territorial integrity. Despite these efforts, the empire continued to lose ground, particularly during the Balkan Wars and other territorial conflicts, as European powers sought to weaken Ottoman influence and expand their own interests. The Tanzimat reforms, 1839 to 1876, the Tanzimat reforms were a series of political, legal and social reforms introduced between 1839 and 1876 in an attempt to modernize the Ottoman Empire and prevent further decline. The word Tanzimat means reorganization, and the reforms were aimed at addressing the empire's internal weaknesses, such as corruption, outdated institutions, and the lack of a cohesive administrative structure. Key elements of the Tanzimat reforms included legal reforms. The Ottomans sought to modernize their legal system, creating new civil and criminal codes inspired by European legal systems. One of the most significant changes was the Hat-I Serif of Gulhane, 1839, which promised equal rights for all citizens of the empire, regardless of religion. This was a notable shift, as previously, non-Muslims had been subject to additional taxes and restrictions. Military reforms. The Ottomans aimed to modernize their military to compete with European powers. This involved the creation of a conscription system to raise a modern army, as well as the establishment of new military schools to train officers in European tactics. Educational reforms. The empire made efforts to improve education, opening new secular schools and universities to train bureaucrats and professionals who could help modernize the state. Economic and administrative changes. The Tanzimat period also saw attempts to improve the empire's taxation system and create a more centralized administration. The reforms sought to curb the autonomy of local governors and bring more control back to the central government. Despite the ambitious scope of the Tanzimat reforms, they faced significant resistance from conservative factions within the empire, particularly among religious leaders and local officials. Additionally, the reforms were only partially successful in addressing the empire's core problems. Corruption remained rampant, and many of the reforms were unevenly implemented across the empire's diverse and far-flung territories. European interventions and pressure. As the Ottoman Empire struggled to modernize, it faced increasing pressure from European powers, particularly Britain, France, Russia, and Austria-Hungary. The Europeans were both interested in weakening the Ottomans and ensuring that the empire's collapse would not destabilize the balance of power in Europe. This created a complex dynamic in which European powers often intervened in Ottoman affairs, either directly or indirectly. One of the most notable examples of European intervention came during the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, in which Britain and France supported the Ottomans against Russia. While the Ottomans technically emerged victorious, the war highlighted the empire's dependence on European support to maintain its sovereignty. The Ottoman Empire's declining military and economic power also made it vulnerable to European economic domination. European countries secured favorable trade agreements with the Ottomans, known as the capitulations, which granted European merchants significant privileges and weakened the Ottoman economy. Loss of territories. The Balkan Wars, 1912 to 1913. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was rapidly losing control over its European territories. The Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913 marked a decisive turning point. Several Balkan states, Serbia, Montenegro, Greece, and Bulgaria, formed the Balkan League and launched a series of military campaigns aimed at driving the Ottomans out of Europe. In the First Balkan War, 1912, the Ottoman Empire lost almost all of its remaining European territories, including the important city of Thessaloniki and much of Macedonia. The Second Balkan War, 1913, saw the Balkan states fighting amongst themselves, but the Ottomans were unable to regain any of their lost territories. These defeats were a major blow to Ottoman prestige and marked the beginning of the end for the empire. By 1913, the Ottomans had lost most of their European territories, leaving only a small portion of land around Istanbul. The empire's decline would culminate in its dissolution after World War I, when the remnants of the Ottoman state were carved up by the victorious Allied powers. Comparing the Ottoman struggle to modern declining superpowers. The Ottoman Empire struggle to retain its territories in the face of internal weaknesses and external pressures can be compared to modern-day superpowers grappling with the loss of influence. Just as the Ottomans attempted to modernize through reforms while facing challenges from rising powers, many nations today find themselves in a similar position. For example, modern superpowers that were once dominant on the global stage may struggle with internal political instability, economic challenges, and competition from rising powers. As these nations attempt to maintain their influence, they may find themselves in a position similar to that of the Ottoman Empire during the Tanzimat period, introducing reforms to modernize but facing resistance from within and pressure from without. The Tanzimat reforms offer a cautionary tale about the difficulties of reforming a deeply entrenched system. Even well-intentioned reforms can fail if they do not address the underlying structural problems or if they face significant resistance from powerful factions. In this sense, the story of the Ottoman Empire's decline remains relevant today. The Tanzimat reforms were a bold attempt to modernize the Ottoman Empire and stave off decline, but they ultimately proved insufficient in the face of both internal challenges and growing European pressure. The empire's gradual loss of territories, culminating in the defeats of the Balkan Wars, signaled the end of its influence in Europe and the beginning of its final collapse. Chapter 8: The Final Collapse, World War I and the Treaty of Sèvres. By the time of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was a shadow of its former self, weakened by centuries of internal decay, territorial losses, and failed reforms. The empire's decision to side with Germany in the conflict would prove fatal, leading to its eventual dissolution and the carving up of its territories. This chapter details the events that led to the empire's final collapse, focusing on the consequences of its involvement in the war and the post-war settlement that sealed its fate. The Ottoman Empire's involvement in World War I. At the start of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was facing an existential crisis. Having already lost much of its territory in Europe during the Balkan Wars, 1912 to 1913, the empire was desperately trying to hold on to what remained. The Ottomans entered the war on the side of the Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary, hoping that an alliance with Germany would help them regain lost territories and stabilize the empire. The decision to join the war was influenced by several factors. Strategic alliances. The Ottomans believed that Germany's military might would offer protection against further territorial losses and that a German victory would allow the empire to recover lands lost to Britain and France. Internal politics. The ruling faction, the Young Turks, led by figures like Enver Pasha, sought to modernize and strengthen the empire. They saw war as an opportunity to rebuild the empire's strength, even though the empire's military and economic capacity were already strained. However, the decision to join the war was a gamble that did not pay off. The empire became embroiled in multiple fronts, most notably the Gallipoli Campaign, 1915 to 1916, where Ottoman forces, under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, successfully repelled the Allied invasion. Despite such victories, the Ottomans were ultimately overmatched and ill-prepared for the scale of the conflict. The war drained the empire's resources and further weakened its already fragile infrastructure. The Armenian Genocide. One of the darkest chapters of the Ottoman Empire's involvement in World War I was the Armenian Genocide. In 1915, the Ottoman government, fearing that the Armenians, a Christian minority within the empire, would side with the Russians, launched a campaign of mass deportations and killings. Between 600,000 and 1.5 million Armenians are believed to have been killed in what is widely regarded as one of the first modern genocides. The Armenian Genocide remains a controversial subject, with Turkey, the successor state of the Ottoman Empire, still disputing the use of the term genocide. However, for the Ottoman Empire, the genocide was part of a larger pattern of internal strife and repression during the war. As the empire struggled to maintain control over its diverse population while fighting on multiple fronts. The Treaty of Sèvres, 1920. The Treaty of Sèvres, signed in 1920, officially marked the end of the Ottoman Empire. After the Central Powers' defeat in World War I, the victorious Allied powers, Britain, France, and Italy, sought to dismantle the empire, which they viewed as a threat to stability in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. The treaty divided up the Ottoman territories, granting large portions to Allied powers and creating new states in the region. Key elements of the Treaty of Sèvres included loss of Arab lands. The Ottoman Empire lost its Arab territories, including Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, which were placed under British and French control through mandates established by the League of Nations. Loss of European territories. The empire was forced to cede Thrace and most of its remaining European territories to Greece, significantly reducing its influence in Europe. Partition of Anatolia. The treaty also proposed dividing Anatolia, the heartland of the Ottoman Empire, among various ethnic groups and foreign powers. The Kurds and Armenians were promised autonomous regions, and the Greeks were granted control over Smyrna, modern-day Izmir. Economic control. The Ottoman Empire's economy was placed under international supervision, with foreign powers controlling key industries and resources. However, the Treaty of Sèvres was never fully implemented. The terms were seen as humiliating by many within the empire, and it sparked a nationalist movement led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who would later become the founding father of modern Turkey. Ataturk's forces rejected the treaty, and after several years of fighting, the Treaty of Lausanne, 1923, replaced it, establishing the borders of the modern Turkish Republic. What if the empire had stayed neutral in World War I? A key question to explore in this chapter is whether the Ottoman Empire could have survived if it had stayed neutral during World War I. Many historians argue that the empire was already too weak to survive much longer, regardless of its involvement in the war. Its internal problems, economic instability, ethnic tensions, and military decline, were too deeply rooted to be solved without significant reform. However, had the empire managed to stay out of the war, it might have avoided the immediate collapse that followed the Central Powers' defeat. The empire's survival might have depended on its ability to enact meaningful reforms and avoid further external pressure from European powers. But given the rising nationalist movements within the empire and the ambitions of Britain, France, and Russia to control Ottoman territories, the long-term survival of the empire seems unlikely. In the end, World War I hastened the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, but the seeds of its decline had been planted long before the conflict began. The empire's involvement in the war, the atrocities committed during the Armenian Genocide, and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Sèvres sealed its fate, leading to the emergence of the modern Middle East and the creation of the Turkish Republic under Ataturk. The empire's story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of overreach and the importance of internal stability in the face of external threats. Chapter 9. Legacy and Conclusion. The Birth of Modern Turkey. With the fall of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, a new chapter began in the history of the region, the rise of modern Turkey. This period was defined by the abolition of the Sultanate, the signing of the Treaty of Lausanne, and the transformative reforms implemented by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. The abolition of the Sultanate, 1922. In 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate, which had ruled for over 600 years, was officially abolished. This marked the end of the Ottoman dynasty and the final blow to an empire that had once spanned 3 continents. The decision to abolish the Sultanate was led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, a military leader and nationalist who believed that the Ottoman monarchy was incompatible with the goals of creating a modern secular state. The last Sultan, Mehmed VI, was deposed and went into exile. The abolition of the Sultanate was a pivotal moment in Turkish history, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new Turkish republic. Ataturk's leadership during this time was instrumental in shaping the country's future and severing ties with the imperial past. The Treaty of Lausanne, 1923. Following the end of World War I, the Treaty of Sèvres had attempted to carve up the remnants of the Ottoman Empire. However, this treaty was never fully implemented due to opposition from Turkish nationalists led by Ataturk. After several years of fighting in the Turkish War of Independence, 1919 to 1923, the Turkish forces managed to renegotiate terms with the Allied powers, leading to the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923. The Treaty of Lausanne is considered the birth certificate of modern Turkey. It recognized the borders of the new Turkish Republic, which included most of Anatolia and eastern Thrace, the remaining Turkish territories after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. The treaty also nullified many of the harsh provisions of the Treaty of Sèvres, restoring Turkish sovereignty and marking a significant victory for Ataturk and his supporters. Ataturk's reforms. As the first president of the newly established Republic of Turkey, Ataturk implemented a series of reforms designed to modernize and secularize the country. These reforms touched every aspect of Turkish society, from politics to culture, and were aimed at creating a modern nation-state in the mold of Western European countries. Key reforms included secularization. One of Ataturk's most significant moves was the separation of religion from the state. The caliphate, which had been a symbol of Islamic leadership, was abolished in 1924, and religious influence in government institutions was diminished. Religious schools were replaced by secular education, and Islamic courts were abolished in favor of a new legal system based on European models. Language and education. Ataturk launched a language reform, replacing the Ottoman script, which used Arabic letters, with the Latin alphabet. This was part of a broader effort to modernize Turkish culture and education. He also promoted public education, making it accessible to all and encouraging scientific and technological progress. Women's rights. Ataturk's reforms also extended to gender equality. He granted women the right to vote in 1930 and the right to run for political office in 1934, ahead of many European countries at the time. Ataturk believed that for Turkey to be a modern society, women needed to be empowered and have equal opportunities in education and employment. Economic and social reforms. Ataturk worked to modernize Turkey's economy, focusing on industrialization and infrastructure development. He encouraged the establishment of state-owned enterprises and emphasized the importance of education and healthcare in fostering a healthy and prosperous society. The lasting cultural and political impact of the Ottoman Empire. While the Ottoman Empire no longer exists, its legacy is still felt today across the Middle East, the Balkans, and Turkey itself. The Ottoman system of governance, which incorporated a diverse array of ethnic and religious groups, influenced the way modern states in the region deal with issues of identity and multiculturalism. The Ottoman legal system, architecture, and cultural practices have also left an indelible mark on countries that were once part of the empire. For modern Turkey, the legacy of the Ottoman Empire is complex. On the one hand, Turkey emerged from the ashes of the empire, breaking with the past and charting a new path towards secularism and nationalism. On the other hand, the memory of the empire continues to shape Turkish politics and identity, with some Turks viewing the Ottoman period as a source of pride and cultural heritage. In the wider region, the empire's collapse reshaped the political landscape, giving rise to new nation-states and conflicts that continue to reverberate today. The partitioning of Ottoman lands by the Allied powers after World War I sowed the seeds for many of the modern-day tensions in the Middle East, particularly with regard to the creation of new borders and the establishment of countries like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. The Ottoman Empire's fall led to the birth of modern Turkey, a country shaped by the visionary leadership of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and his ambitious reforms. While the Ottoman era has ended, its influence is still deeply embedded in the cultural and political fabric of Turkey and the broader region. The empire's rise and fall offer important lessons about the challenges of modernization, the dangers of overreach, and the enduring power of cultural legacies. The Ottoman Empire may be gone, but its story remains relevant in understanding the world today. Thank you for sticking with us to the very end. Your time is valuable, and the fact that you stayed shows just how dedicated you are to learning about history and the rise and fall of great empires. You're part of an amazing community, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, so be sure to drop a comment below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our next video. Your support makes